Hi, everyone. My name's Carl Wright. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at Attack IQ, and I'm super excited today to introduce a longtime friend and business associate, John Baker from the Center for Threat Informed Defense. And John is the director for the of Threat Informed Defense. And today we're going to be talking about the center and a lot of the amazing projects and work that they've been doing to help uh, bring MITRE ATT&CK to state of the art and state of the practice to everyone around the world today as a public good. John, welcome today.
Yeah, well, welcome everybody, and Carl, thanks for having me here. I'm excited to kind of dig into things and talk about the great work that we've been doing at the center and the resources that are available to the community.
Well, that's great. Well, we've got a lot to cover today, so I thought let's jump right into it. And I know we have some slides here uh, for for everyone. So why don't we just talk about what the genesis? I mean, why did we come up? Why did you come up with the Center for Threat Informed Defense, and kind of how do you think about it today from where it
Yeah,
started?
I love telling the Genesis story. Yeah, we a few years back, we were working with the community, advancing MITRE ATT&CK, and we had organizations coming to us asking, were we really committed to kind of continuing to further and develop MITRE ATT&CK? Was there ways in which they could help? Were there other teams that were working on some of similar R&D projects? And we really wanted a way to engage with some of these sophisticated security teams that were very like-minded, working to develop resources to have a global impact and really try to advance threat-informed defense at scale. But we didn't have a way to do that. And so, we kind of set out to solve that problem. And that led to us creating what is now the Center for Threat Informed Defense. And so at this point, we're just over 3 years old. We have about 30 member organizations, and we've deliberately crafted our membership to be global and cross sector. We're trying to make sure that we have a diverse set of perspectives that help us focus in on the right problems that are going to have the biggest impact across the community. And ultimately, we get together with those members and launch R&D projects to solve problems for the whole community. And I think, Carl, you guys and the Attack IQ team have been huge supporters and great partners as we've launched the center. I think you were one of the very first organizations to join us as a founder. And we've had the benefit of working with you and the Attack IQ team on, I think, nearly a dozen projects now.
Well, it's been absolutely wonderful, John, and I don't think we can overstate the impact that the MITRE ATT&CK framework has had for cyber defensive operations and practitioners around the globe in trying to get a handle on this massive escalation of attacks and sophistication of adversaries. And it used to be government on government, but now it's government on civilian, and the threat landscape is getting more sophisticated and more complex. And so this has been great. I want to jump back because the MITRE ATT&CK in the early Genesis days was competing with a lot of other frameworks. DoD kind of had their own framework, and DHS had a framework, and other folks had frameworks. What do you attribute the success of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and obviously culminating in the Center for Threat Informed Defense? How do you think about those early Genesis days?
Yeah, Carl, I think I'd kind of attribute success with Attack really back to how we got started. This was a very much a grassroots initiative. It was driven by early research that MITRE was doing to try to understand how to improve ability to detect an adversary. And in that process, one of the logical questions is, well, what does an adversary do once they're in your environment, right? And that led the research team to start to go through intel reports to try to figure out, not just the IOCs that you might see in a given attack, but like what specifically do adversaries do when they're inside an enterprise environment? And the team started to catalog these things. The research continued on, but as the research kind of wrapped up, we realized, and I can't take credit for this, but the core team kind of realized and recognized that that list of behaviors was actually really valuable. We then kind of worked to refine and expand that. And that list is what ended up eventually becoming the initial release of the attack framework. And it was a big shift at the time. We were in an environment where people were thinking about kind of building bigger walls and, stronger perimeter defenses was the answer. And, this was a shift to start to think about, all right, well, let's assume an adversary does get into your enterprise. Post compromise, what do they do? How do they achieve their goals? And part of that shift was also, very well aligned with some of the work that David Bianco did in developing the pyramid of pain, kind of working across the community to shift towards thinking about adversary behaviors. How do I, first understand them? How do I detect them? How do I test and emulate those behaviors in my environment to ensure that my defenses are working as I expect them to work? And so this has been kind of a journey or an evolution over time, but it really started with the attack team and their work initially cataloging adversary behaviors and deciding to publish those. Kind of started this whole shift across the community. And I'd say now, what we've seen play out is that shift. It's sort of grown into something bigger. It's not just attack, it's really threat-informed defense. And it's working to systematically understand adversary behaviors, use that knowledge to test and improve your defensive capabilities. So we've made a ton of progress over the last few years. There's plenty more to do, though, for sure.
Well, we have a number of slides we're going to go through today, and we're here to focus on some of the great work that the center did this last year. But I do think it does help, maybe some of the listeners who not
Yeah,
well, I don't want to say this. I think everybody knows who MITRE ATT&CK is, what the MITRE ATT&CK framework is by now. But if we remember back to the early days, it was just the enterprise framework, right? And that has really exploded with the work that the center's done. And can you talk a little bit about, how you drive this collaboration to help organizations operationalize the MITRE ATT&CK as well as democratize it for the world?
yeah. I think Carl, the thing that we've developed within the center, with you and with our center members, is essentially an innovation pipeline. We're always looking across the community to identify kind of gaps and challenges. These might be things we identify within our center membership base that we see across the community that other people bring to our attention. We evaluate those things and then we make decisions around which of those problems we want to try to address. We then work together with our membership to solve them. And at the center, we're a nonprofit with a mission to advance threat informed defense globally. So as we go through our research program, everything we end up doing, we have an eye towards how do we make sure that this is a impactful resource that will make change and improve cyber defense for the community as a whole. And we very much are trying to create resources that teams can take and use to improve their own defensive capabilities. I think the center, we now have a nice track record of developing resources that I think of as sort of foundational, that enable innovation among security teams, among security solution providers, to really kind of drive the advancement of threat-informed defense across the community. And Carl, to your comment about sort of the growth and evolution of attack, obviously you guys worked directly with us on some of the very early work we did in the center around expanding out attack for cloud and working to figure out if there is even a need for an attack for containers matrix. And that was a great project because the kind of the research hypothesis was that we thought there was enough intel to drive the creation of a whole new matrix in attack. We didn't know for sure. There was risk there. We weren't certain that we would have the intel to make up the set of techniques to add to the attack framework there. But in the end, we did. And if you look at attack today, you'll see the container matrix. And that was directly driven through the center's R&D program. And so, that's just kind of one example of many that we've had over the last few years where we can get together as a community, say, this is a problem we want to solve, and then work to systematically solve that problem for the whole community.
Well, it was an incredibly busy year with CTED last year. A lot of amazing projects. And I guess that kind of correlates to this increase in adversary behavior. I mean, more adversaries, more problems, more and important research needs to come out of the center. Well, let's jump into some of that. Let's talk about the problem areas that are trying to be addressed today.
Yeah, I think as we've evolved within the center and as we kind of dig into the impact report, you'll see that there's some themes or problem areas that we're trying to tackle with the center's research program. Um, I think you all know people generally see there's a lot of great threat intel products out there, but in many, many cases, it's simply too hard to operationalize threat intelligence for most organizations. I think we need to change that. And so, one of the core thrusts of our research program is working to increase that operational effectiveness of threat intel products. We want to make it much easier for the global community to use the great intel products that are out there to improve their defenses. And so when you think about threat informed defense, that's right at the foundation. We got to work to improve that. We need to then use that knowledge to help defenders better understand how to test and evaluate their security capabilities from the perspective of an adversary. Right? We want to make it much easier for every organization to look at their defenses through that lens of the adversary. And I think that that's really foundational to driving defensive measures or improving defensive measures. And so when I think about the sort of focus areas for our research program, it's really these three. We want to advance threat intel and its operational effectiveness. We want to make it much easier for everybody to test and evaluate their capabilities from that perspective of an adversary. We want to use that knowledge to drive improvement in defensive measures. And ultimately, we're working together with our membership to do that across the whole community. And so as we go into the report here, you'll see lots of specific projects that are aligned with these different problem areas.
Well, John, this is probably one of my favorite areas in the world to talk about. But you can't manage what you can't measure, right? And the other thing that there's a lot of people that have different roles in cybersecurity today, and they may have different uses for the MITRE ATT&CK framework depending on what roles that they are from a cyber defensive operations perspective. And one of the things I always like to tell CISOs, if they don't know anything else about the MITRE ATT&CK framework, is that all of the TTPs that are in there, the reason they're in there and the reason they buy cyber defensive controls, whether it's firewalls or EDR or whatever the capability is because it's those controls prevent or detect things in the MITRE ATT&CK framework, right? If it's not in the framework, then there's a big chance that something we don't know about, that control isn't going to stop it. So this really talks to real quick about how important community is and how important people are submitting things, intelligence reports for things that they're seeing in the wild, so that we
Yeah,
can continue to evolve the framework. Can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, absolutely. And you're, something you said there also I think is worth emphasizing. Um, Absolutely. The community has a critical role to play in advancing threat informed defense, not just in implementing threat informed defense within your organization, but also in contributing to further that foundational knowledge of adversary behavior. We have projects in our R&D pipeline that we're working on now that are really entirely dependent on the community coming together and saying, we want to understand that global picture of adversary behaviors. And that's only possible with community contributions. Um, as a community, I think we've been making steady improvement around intel sharing and kind of recognizing that there's huge global benefit to sharing around adversary behaviors, and there's relatively low risk there in sharing information about adversary behaviors that have been seen in the wild. But that continued sharing and contribution from the community is really critical. I'd say, at a sort of a smaller scale beyond like information sharing, I love to hear from people about how they're using center R&D. I want to make sure that the work that we create through the center's research program is easily used, is maximally impactful, right? And so when people tell us how they're using research projects, the challenges they have, or ideas for refinement, that's actually really valuable to us too. And that's a great way that really anybody who's picked up something that we've done through the center can help us make that work better, make that work much more impactful.
Well, that's a perfect lead-in, John, for basically jumping into the impact report. And I know this is a busy slide probably for the audience to look at. I'm going to leave this up here for a few minutes, but that seems on the right down there. A lot of projects got done in this last year.
Yeah, Carl, we it was a busy year last year, and I think focusing on the number of projects is it's interesting, but what I really like to focus on is like the so what about specific projects. Um, you know, 10 projects versus 8 projects, that's a nice thing to kind of compare. But, having a project that is used globally and is helping defenders further their understanding of adversary behaviors and further their ability to defend against them, that's what we're here for, right? And so, I thought it is that said about the numbers. I think it's worth noting, we're now a little over 3 years since we launched the center. This is our second annual impact report. We ran 9 projects last year. And what I love about the innovation pipeline and kind of the engine the R&D engine that we've built within the center is that right now we're running 4 projects. Carl, as you know, we're kicking off 3 projects this month. Pretty soon we'll be running 7 concurrent projects. And we have a really healthy pipeline and a roadmap of impactful work plan for this year. So that engine is always going. I feel like we're continually building momentum with, the perspectives that you guys and the rest of our membership bring into the research program. And so I hope that with each successive year, we're always kind of building on the work that we've done the previous year. And we're seeing more and more impact through our research program across the community.
Yeah, I agree, John. And we're going to pick out a couple of these projects to talk about today on this call that we both think were pretty darn impactful. But I encourage the audience, if you haven't already, go to the CTID website and both two things. Number one, download this report. It's comprehensive. We're going to give you some snapshots out of it over the next few minutes. But also, you can also check out all the work that the center has done in great detail to include downloading these projects and how to take advantage of them. So with that said, why don't we jump into the first one? And we did talk about this at the top of the show. So let's bring everybody all the way around.
Right. So this is a favorite project of mine because that theme of kind of creating a foundational resource that enables innovation across the community. I think this is a really good example of it. So with this project, we did 2 things. First off, we had security teams that, when you look at the enterprise attack matrix, they were sort of all independently having to do the work to figure out, okay, of the whole set of nearly 500 techniques and sub-techniques in the attack matrix, which apply for my scenario when I'm trying to defend resources in an infrastructure as a service environment. And rather than have each team have to go figure that out on their own, we put this project together where we did the analysis. We set up a set of criteria. We documented that. We published our criteria. And then we also published the results of the work, which was a clear sort of corpus of techniques that we believe, based on that criteria, apply to an infrastructure as a service scenario. So you as a defender now can, instead of doing that analysis, you can just fast forward right to, okay, I have resources that are leveraging infrastructure as a service. What techniques should I be focused on? And so as a kind of a theme with the research program, Carl, we also put together a set of tooling to help others do the same thing and kind of do that same sort of analysis for other use cases. I'm pretty excited because in the very near future, we're putting together an analysis of the techniques that apply for ICS environments. And it's going to leverage the same foundational set of resources and have the same kind of structured output so that a defender that's thinking about protecting ICS resources now understands clearly, based on a defined set of criteria, what techniques make sense in that environment. And so I love this because it
No, and that's
develops
awesome.
a resource. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so with this one and the upcoming ICS project, is there a call to action, further call to action, besides people checking this out and taking advantage of it? Is there something the community
Absolutely.
could do to take this to the next level?
So yeah, in my mind, and this is a pretty common theme, Carl, across the research program. It's first off, use it. tell us what you think. Tell us if you run into questions, issues, you have ideas around making just the resource itself better. And that applies to the analysis product, but also that underlying infrastructure that's been created. Um, and the next level beyond that is, I'd really like the community when people do this analysis to kind of step back and figure out, can I share the results of that analysis? I had an individual reach out to me the other day as an example that I love, and I would love to see more of this. He's doing an analysis of techniques that apply in a low code, no code kind of scenario. And he's looked at our work and he's building out the same sort of overlay, leveraging that same infrastructure. And that's spectacular. And I'm hoping that, we'll end up with that as another resource that the community can now leverage rather than each team having to do this on their own. So yeah, Carl, it's use it. Tell us about the work and how you're using it, how we can refine it. If you kind of take that next step with this project and you want to create your own sort of overlay for a particular scenario, share it with us. We would love to review it and integrate it into the corpus so the whole community can benefit from it.
Well, I noticed the center's done a great job when the community does contribute. You give them attribution for that too, which is awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, this next one is one of my all-time favorites after 3 years here. This one I get super excited about. But why don't you take us through the top level?
Yeah, I'd just say the genesis story, if you will, Carl, for this one. It really came about with some of our center members recognizing that we all, as a community, need to kind of move beyond the technique by technique focus. So many cybersecurity teams, naturally, when they start to use attack, of course, you start thinking about individual techniques, and that's good. It's necessary. You should do that. But you also need to step back and recognize that a adversary doesn't use just one technique. An attack actually consists of multiple techniques that adversaries put together in a sequence to achieve a goal, right? And until the attack flow project came along, there was no open community data format to allow you to represent those flows. We had a couple of kind of driving use cases that led to this work. We wanted to make it much easier to communicate to leadership around true coverage against attacks. Communicating upward to leadership around a particular technique isn't very effective. But when you have major attacks hitting the news, it's really nice to be able to say, all right, for that attack, here's our defensive posture based on the sequence of TTPs that are explained in that attack. And this is what we think we should do, what our course of action should be, right? So that was one of the main drivers. And then on the other side of it, we really want to get to where we're able to develop much more robust detection capabilities, understanding the sequence of steps as opposed to defending against just individual techniques. But
Well,
several other core use cases in there. But those are the two that really kind of led to the innovation here.
yeah, for me, there was four things that I loved about this project. The first one was so many of the center's participants came together
Yeah.
to help fund this and to participate and contribute their knowledge, skills, and abilities to it. This was a hard project because there was a lot of different approaches that could be taken, and this community, the sponsors came together to produce what I think is an excellent product. The second thing is, I feel like for me personally, this helped, other projects that we're working on at the center, things like attack calculator and other things where, we start thinking about choke point analysis. We start thinking about, other things, right? That, from an attack perspective, really back to the mission, as part of the mission of the center, increasing the state of the art and the state of the practice. This definitely satisfied, that mission statement. And then, personally for Attack IQ, we took this research and built it right into our product. It was awesome to be able to do things like that and leverage it directly, giving that out to the world, right? So there's just a lot going on here.
I think, Carl, the thing I love about this is, as you said, we had tremendous engagement from our center participants and really kind of figuring out what is attack flow, right? And if you look at that set of logos, what you see is a really diverse set of perspectives that came to bear to solve this problem with us. And the result of that is a resource that, as you said, Carl, it now is a good foundation for a lot of further innovation. As we look forward in the center's research program, I fully expect us to be integrating attack flows into solutions that we develop in the future and innovating around how to apply attack flows to different scenarios. So I'm really excited about that as we kind of go forward with the research program.
Well, this one's definitely check this one out if you haven't already on the website and get the full download of what this can do. I think you guys will find it very interesting. And then, this is my other favorite one. It's shocking, two in a row. Top attack techniques. Can you take us through this one?
Yeah, this one I love this one too, Carl, because it's a problem that pretty much every security team wrangles with, and that ultimately comes down to a question of prioritization. What did I focus my resources on next? And that's true for people that are just learning what MITRE ATT&CK is. That's true for the most sophisticated organizations that have been using ATT&CK for years and it's fully baked into their operations. Everybody needs to step back and figure out, how do I prioritize and where should I focus next? And so that's the problem that we set out to try to solve with the Top Attack Techniques project. And one of the other reasons I like this project is that if you look across the community, you do a Google search for, top attack technique list, you're going to find lots of top attack technique lists, but they all, are kind of coming at it from a different sort of perspective. And no one had really well defined and shared an open methodology. And so what we wanted to do was kind of take in as input and perspectives all of those other lists out there. We wanted to then work with our research participants that have a lot of thought and perspective on how you might prioritize to come up with one open methodology. And because we want to create practical resources, the methodology is great. A lot of organizations have built capability around that methodology. We also built a calculator that's accessible to anyone, any organization, any individual can go and open up the calculator, input some criteria, and get a list of techniques based on our methodology to focus on. And so it gives you a way to kind of systematically work through improving your defensive capabilities. We looked at prevalence, technique choke points, and actionability. And that was something that was really important for us as we thought about how to prioritize techniques. Defenders have to be able to do something about it. There's no sense in making a technique the number one priority if you can't do anything about it. So we came up with a way of measuring actionability, and that was really important for us. Prevalence, I feel like, is relatively straightforward and obvious, but the choke point piece, I think, was somewhat innovative in this project itself. We recognize that there's some techniques that if you're able to mitigate that technique or defend against that technique effectively, you don't have to necessarily think about other techniques that, an adversary must first do step one before they can get to step 2 and 3. And, those choke points are driven up in the prioritization list. So we kind of came up with a way of doing that choke point analysis, prevalence analysis, actionability. That's all behind the scenes in the methodology. For users, you can just go to the calculator, and we've implemented that methodology.
Well, I love this project for all those reasons you just said, but I'm going to add one more that you and I talk about all the
Yep.
time, which is around the democratization of the ability for people to leverage the MITRE ATT&CK framework. As we all know, different organizations have different capability maturity model, capability maturity, and their
Yep.
ability to operationalize attack is you have haves and have-nots. And this project, I think, really helps everyone, not just the multinationals, not just the most sophisticated security teams, but everybody. I love it.
I think you're spot on, Carl. This is a great example where we're able to leverage perspectives from across the community, but we have a very sophisticated set of security teams working together on this, sharing their perspectives, driving an open resource that the whole community can leverage so that people don't have to go and reinvent that wheel. We don't expect every security team to be able to do that. We should give a foundational resource to enable them.
Yeah, I think this is a great one, John. Um, Well, I mean, we can't. I think the world is coming to grips that we're spending a lot of money on compliance and a lot of money on, threat, right? And I think the reality is boards of directors and executives would like to see a convergence between risk management and threat management. Let's talk about NIST 853 and what happened here.
Yeah, Carl, that convergence is exactly what drove this project. Um, to be honest, this was one of the first projects that we developed within the center. This year, we did a pretty significant update on the project, bringing it up to speed with the latest version of attack. And for those of you that are already aware of this project and using it, because it is one of our most widely used projects, just know we got another update coming here as the next attack release comes out in a bit. And I think that's important to note because this is a resource that we've created and made available to the community that we continue to sustain because it's really important. And ultimately, what we've done here is we've created a connection from the set of the known TTPs, the known threats captured in the attack knowledge base, back to the set of security controls defined in 853. And so now, if you're thinking about your 853 compliance and looking at security controls, you have a way to see directly, sort of a direct linkage back to the set of adversary behaviors that a given security control mitigates. And so I'll tell you, and Carl, that it was a lot of work to put this together. As the slide here shows, it's something like 6,300 rows and a giant spreadsheet. That's all unstructured data that's intended to be machine readable as well, with tools to allow you to manipulate that data and use it. But each of those rows is its own bit of analysis. It's a lot of work to
Yeah.
put together.
This
But
this was a tough project, man. I mean, and I know that many organizations out there have probably spent years and lots of people, man hours, doing these
yeah,
mappings themselves or trying to do these mappings themselves. And this was at some level, this was a little subjective. Can we talk a little bit about that and kind of how we go through this?
yeah, yeah. You're spot on, Carl. It is ultimately a bit subjective, and our way of addressing that subjectivity is to define a methodology, document it, and then kind of hold ourselves to that methodology as we go through and do the mappings. Um, by doing that, what we do is we create an environment where other teams can use this work. They can understand the nature of our decisions, why we make decisions the way we do when we do the mappings. And they can decide maybe they want to tailor it for their environment, for their organization, but they have that foundational resource in place. I at some point I should try to like do the back of the napkin calculation to figure out what we've saved. But I do know that these mappings are used by hundreds of organizations. It might be more than hundreds at this point, and that it took us a lot of time and effort to put together this resource. And now those organizations don't have to do this. And so we've saved, I think, the community thousands and thousands of hours of staff time. And you know what that means? You can put that time into furthering your own security posture and not worrying about what's the relationship between attack and 853. We can solve that, and you can worry about your own organization's defenses.
No, I think that's spot on. The other thing, and we'll move to the next project, I'll say on this is it helps to now bring a common lexicon where one was completely missing. And
That's
it's
right.
not, it doesn't solve world hunger when it comes to this situation, this convergence. There's more work to be done. But wow, it's such a great first step for a common lexicon between risk and threat.
Yeah, I think Carl. We've talked about this a bunch. The research program within the center, we say we're trying to advance the state of the art and the state of the practice. I see this project squarely in the camp of advancing the state of the practice. We've now taken this large chunk of work off the table and allowed security teams to focus on their own organizations and their defenses and other issues. And as you said, we've now created a way of linking threat to security controls, trying to further the community there.
Well, John, I continue to look forward to all the enhancements that we have opportunity to make for 853. You think there's some other control frameworks that would be worth mapping or that the center should take a look at?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two things, Carl. I think that there's some work that we can do to make the whole set of mappings because we've done 853. We've mapped every one of the major platforms and their security capabilities to attack. We've done some mappings with CV. I'd like to make all of those mappings resources much more accessible to the whole community, kind of bringing them together. So I'm hoping that's something we tackle within the research program. And then, when I look at other frameworks out there, first and foremost in my mind is like, working maybe with the CIS team to come up with mappings for the CIS controls. And, to be honest, the way we prioritize this is really driven by you, our members, and the community's needs. And so, kind of going to your recurring theme there, Carl, if you as a user are looking at this and saying, I love it, but God, I wish you did, mappings for this other framework, let us know. I can't guarantee we can map everything, but we definitely do want to make sure that we're putting together that set of sort of foundational resources that can be really broadly used by the community to advance threat informed defense.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I think, there's a lot of great projects, and we've just cherry picked a couple that I think are really good representations of the work that we're doing in the center and the work that you're leading, John. But, let's talk about what people should do after this presentation today.
Yeah, I think I always break it down into a couple of camps, right? I think I would encourage everybody to go check out the work. I like to believe that through the research program, we're solving problems that are broadly applicable. So I would love to think that your security team, would benefit from looking through the resources that we've already created and leveraging those. And then, if you want to help us make the program better, tell us how you're using them. That drives what we do. Right. So that's kind of how, the first step, I would say, Carl. And then I think beyond that, there's opportunities for really active engagement in the program. I gave an example around like the low code, no code scenario earlier on in our conversation here. If you are doing work around threat informed defense and you're interested in kind of sharing that with us, would love to hear about it. If you're leveraging our resources and kind of innovating with them, would love to hear about that and work with you to integrate some of those ideas and concepts into the research program directly, to benefit the whole community. And then, for that set of organizations that is, highly sophisticated and, maybe internally innovating, and you're interested in getting together with other sophisticated security teams, we've created a venue for that, and we'd be happy to talk with organizations about membership. As we go, Carl, you and I've talked about this a bit. I really am trying to thoughtfully build out a global cross-sector membership base. I want to make sure that we have that diversity of perspectives within our membership base so that we're focusing on the right problems, so that we're having the most possible impact through the research program. And so if you kind of see yourself tackling problems like what we're tackling within the research program, and you'd like to start to get involved and innovate with us, certainly reach out to us. Obviously, there's a QR code up on the screen. That's going to get you direct access to this report. Great, easy way to start. Check out the report. You can learn about who we are at the center, what we did, and then kind of ramp up from there.
And John, I actually used that QR code, and it did not take me to a nefarious site. So everybody rest assured that it takes you to the CTID website. You can get access to this and a lot of other great resources. And I'd be chagrined if I didn't also mention the MITRE ATT&CK Defender certification and all the great training that team is providing around helping organizations operationalize the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And I also bring up Attack IQ Academy, which is our free academy, and a lot of the content. I mean, probably well over 60% of the courses we teach are relegated right back to these research projects that we sponsor with the center to increase state of the art and state of the practice of the MITRE ATT&CK framework and threat informed defense. Well, John, it's been great talking to you today, as always. Any parting words you'd like to say to the audience before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks, Carl, for inviting me in here. It's been great to get to talk with you and the whole community here. Um, for us at the center, we're ultimately driven by making a difference. We are trying to advance threat informed defense globally to improve every organization's cyber defenses, right? That takes community, as we talked about. And so, if you're in a position to be able to contribute, whether it's ideas or data, inspiration, support, we love that. Advocacy is great. Spread the word, get involved, contribute. Very much value, and as Carl said, we put a lot of effort into recognizing contributions. So we want to give people credit for their work. Um, but beyond that, check out the work, tell us what you think, and hopefully we hear from you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, John, and thank you to the center as well for creating an organization, a consortium of like minds that are interested in helping cyber defensive operators across the globe. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.